Now, and we shall begin. Okay, welcome everyone. We are here for the fourth time to talk about racial and social justice and us issues. So how the current state of affairs in America, the civil unrest that's happening around systemic racism is affecting us and the work that we do and what we can do about the issues that we are all witnessing. And we are very fortunate today to have some gentlemen from the Kentucky Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression to talk to us a little bit about the idea of what can we do about it and what is protest and why do people do that. So one of the things that I decided early on when this topic exploded across the nation is that I think it's really important that our agency is on the right side of history on this thing. And as I've said in person and in emails in the past, that being quiet, the time to be quiet is over. And it's time for people to, I guess for lack of a better term, pick a side. And so that's why I wanted to provide a venue for discussion and education, and why I'm continuing to share as many resources as I can with everyone. So this will be our last session until August. We're gonna take a break for a couple weeks and then we'll pick this back off in August. The only other thing to say is that as we talked about in the first meeting and as I said in the original email, we are going forth with a baseline of grace. We will afford one another grace. In terms of trying not to take offense to things that people say. And if somebody says something that is offensive, finding a way to let them know that in a civil and professional manner. I really asked for it for me because I knew at some point I would say or do something wrong on this topic because it's just a really hard topic. And part of the reason it is a tough topic is because people are scared to talk about it. Scared they'll say the wrong thing, they'll offend someone. So I think if we all can just keep that idea of grace in our mind and proceed with that, I think that we can have real, honest, frank conversations, ask difficult questions, and face it, and learn to be better. So that's the idea. That's where we're going. And we are very, very privileged to have Ira Grouper with us and Dre Dawson to help us. So without further ado, I will let Dre's going to introduce himself and talk a bit, and then I will introduce Ira and he'll talk a little bit, and then we will have time for questions as we go along. So thank you for joining. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Thank you. I guess I get the short end of the stick. I got to start talking first. That's what I get for not sending in my bio. But I do so much. And when everybody asks me what a bio is or what's my bio, I always I don't know. I write it and then people close to me say, you didn't put everything on there. So, we're just gonna roll with it. My name is Dre Dawson. I'm born and raised in Louisville. I went to Howard University, came back, graduated from U of L, in communications, Pan-African studies, along with political science and philosophy. I worked for Metro government for a while. I worked for the news stations in Louisville, WOKY. I worked for them for about 4 years. I worked for Metro Council with different council people for about 4 or 5 years. I've ran political races all throughout the state of Kentucky from the governor on down to Metro Council to aldermen. I did a lot of work in the West Louisville, which is typically considered one of the lowest socioeconomic places in Louisville, if you know anything about us right across the bridge. Right now, I do a lot of community services with youth. I'm the Minister of Defense and Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party, the local chapter here in Louisville. We work on, we have a few different programs going, but one that's most, I guess, associated with what we're talking about here today is a family trauma center that we're getting initiated over here on this side to help people in the community heal from different traumas that have been put onto individuals in the community over years and years and decades. We're talking about family issues that span, and please let me know if y'all can't hear me, because I don't know if I'm being heard. I'm just watching the green bar, so I'm assuming everybody can hear me. But we're developing a family trauma center that we have that's going to deal with the historical and systematic traumas that have been placed, especially in the lower income and Black communities. Because I say lower income because we also service Portland, which is also a low economic community, but its demographic is predominantly of the white race. So we are helping everybody down here that's in the gut. I'm sorry. We are helping everybody down here. And this is the work that I've committed to. Right now, I'm the co-chair of the Kentucky Alliance. Ira, my brother down here, he is a board member, former chair. He does great work in the community. Angela will tell you about that now. So outside of the Alliance and the Black Panthers, I teach Tai Chi and martial arts to youth in the community, teach them how to defend themselves, make sure they come home every night, because we live in a dangerous neighborhood. You probably just recently seen me on the news for stopping that active shooter down in Jefferson Square, trying to shoot up the protesters. So if you're like, I know his face from somewhere, that's probably it lately. I don't know what else to say. I don't like to talk about myself, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to Angela.
Okay, that's fair, since I passed it off to you without much warning. I was just sending putting a chat in to let people know if they joined late about the camera situation. And I could hear you fine, Dre. I assume everyone else could, or they would have been making it known that they couldn't hear you. So I think we're good on that. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Ira. I didn't know Ira before this, so I'm getting to know him as we talked about what I was looking for in this session. And I thought that's one reason why I invited some other folks who I know are active in this movement, and I thought they would get a big kick out of this. So my favorite thing on Ira's bio is where he said he has his distinguished civil rights movement jail record spans both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. So I think that's very cool. And so he's done hard time for these actions, or maybe it wasn't hard. I wasn't there, but I think that's cool. So Ira Grouper's been active in the progressive struggle since 1959, starting in the 60s in New York City with red strikes and organizing school boycotts. In the 1970s, he was among the first group of disabled complainants in the US to win a handicapped employment discrimination complaint under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And he retired from an assembly line job with 24 years seniority in 1999. And the job that he did for those 24 years, the employer originally said he was too disabled to do. So he proved them wrong for 24 years. Ira represented his union as a delegate to the Greater Louisville Central Labor Council for 8 years and was a union shop steward for 21 years. In the 80s, he was commissioner and vice chair of the Louisville and Jefferson County Human Relations Committee and chaired commission's panel that ruled on allegations of discrimination. He's an expert on affirmative action. In the 80s, late 80s, In the early 90s, he was national co-chair of the New Jewish Agenda, which opposed the Israeli oppression of the Palestinian people. He's well-traveled. He's been to the Middle East 6 times, once for an entire 6 months, visiting Israel, the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Amman, Jordan, and Cairo, Egypt. He's been to other countries in Latin America and Europe and Vietnam on human rights observer missions, most recently spending 5 weeks in Europe looking into opposition to the anti-immigration wave. He served 2 terms as commissioner of the Louisville Metro Human Relations Commission. He retired about 6 years ago as adjunct professor at Bellarmine, where he taught the Israeli-Palestinian impasse and the U.S. civil rights movement and its place in history. Currently, he writes a newspaper column titled Labor Pains and is on the board of the Kentucky Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression and the Metro Louisville Disability Coalition. And so welcome, Ira. Thank you so much for sharing your bio with us and for being willing to do this with us. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Angela. I'm honored to have been invited to present today. You'll forgive me for reading, but that's what I have to do because I don't extemporize very well. I also have a number of questions to ask people. And what I will do is send those questions, email them to Angela so she can forward them to everybody else. I titled my thing today, Social Workers and the Society in which Social Workers Work. Sisters and brothers, and we are all of us sisters and brothers. I first wish to thank Angela for this invitation to speak. Now buckle your seatbelts. In Louisville, Kentucky, the recent murder by police of Breonna Taylor and the string of police killings across the U.S. have given rise to a multiracial outpouring of demonstrations led by African Americans. As I speak, people are openly protesting. Come now, attorneys for Breonna Taylor's family, linking the raid that led to the 26-year-old emergency medical technician's death to a gentrification plan, contending that police formed a special squad dubbed place-based investigations just to target homes in the redevelopment area. People needed to be removed and homes needed to be vacated so that a high-dollar legacy-creating real estate development could move forward, end quote, attorneys said in the complaint. Racism and conquest are historical pandemic crises throughout the world, including the US. We can look back to Greece in the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BC, and the list is long. From slavery to the Civil War, from Reconstruction to the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, from the Black Codes to the Plessy v. Ferguson, from World War I through the Palmer Raids, Great Depression, World War II, the McCarthy, neo-fascism, racism was a pandemic, and it is currently a pandemic. Then came the civil rights movement of the late 1950s and 1960s, and now today's movement. I was, as a white person, privileged to play a small part of this massive African-American-led multiracial fight back in the 1960s, the civil rights movement. Yesterday, July 16th, there were 77,000 new cases of coronavirus. How will that impact the demonstrations for racial justice and other things? The philosopher Santayana was correct. Those who refuse to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. So please let me take you back to the Deep South in the 1960s. Let me tell you about an extraordinary woman first. Her name was Mary Spencer, and she lived in Columbia, a small Mississippi town in the southern part of the state, located between Jackson, Mississippi, and New Orleans. Miss Mary was one of the most dedicated freedom fighters I have ever known. She was smart, tenacious, determined, and kind and gentle as well. Her life was not easy. She worked long hours for little pay in a white woman's house, cooking, cleaning, and then some. Then she came home to cook for her family. She also fed civil rights workers. And just so you'll know having anything to do with the MFDP, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, could cost you your job, your house, and sometimes your life. It cost Miss Mary her house. The bank foreclosed and the family had to move out. Miss Mary had little formal education, but she had a real education in true life in the struggle for a world free from racial segregation, apartheid made right here in the USA. After Miss Mary fed us, she would stand while we sat and ate in her own house. We didn't know what to do. We did not want to disrespect Miss Mary in her own house, and yet we felt so ashamed sitting while she stood. Miss Mary served us dinner one day and stood while we ate. Curtis Stiles, an African-American who directed the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in Columbia, and I hit on a plan. We stood up. Curtis said very gently but very determinedly, "Miss Mary, if you have to stand while you eat, so do we." So Miss Mary sat down in her own house and ate. She had tears in her eyes, and so did Curtis, and so did I. We would not let the racists control us ideologically, and Miss Mary knew this. After the meal, she hugged Kurt and me very tightly. She tried to organize a maids union in Columbia. Again, this is way back in the 1960s. Unfortunately, she found it impossible to do so, too many separate workplaces. But this indicates how determined Miss Mary was to build a better world. At age 84, she passed away and joined the ancestors. Miss Mary truly personified the words in one civil rights song. "And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free." Now let me tell you about another situation. It was dubbed the Fairgrounds Motel. 950 civil rights protesters, I among them, were arrested in Jackson, Mississippi in June of 1965. This was one of the largest mass arrests of the civil rights movement, exceeded only by the mass jailing in Birmingham, Alabama, Albany, Georgia, Durham, and Greensboro, North Carolina, Orangeburg, South Carolina, Selma, Alabama, and the adjacent Black Belt counties, all in 1963. I was in the first wave of those arrested in Jackson, Mississippi. We were protesting the illegal convening of the Mississippi State Legislature, illegal because of the disfranchisement of its Black citizens. Women were separated from men, and I did not see my imprisoned sisters in struggle until we were released on bond almost 2 weeks later. We arrived in prison trucks at the state fairgrounds where cattle had been kept and then moved, and which was the same building and same concrete floor where we would be housed. After being booked, we had to pass through a cordon of Mississippi State Police. Some of us were beaten. In the cavernous hall where we wound up, there were additional beatings for protesting the cops segregating us. African-American civil rights protesters on one side, facing white freedom fighters on the other side. When dinner was to be served, the guards, as a form of control and humiliation, forced the whites to line up first. Each white inmate was given a slice of bologna stuck between two stale pieces of bread and a paper cup with milk, or rather tepid water with a little milk powder. Each white guy returned with his meal to his spot on the cement floor on the white side, sat down cross-legged, and placed the cup on the floor, sandwich on top of the cup in front of him. Then the African-American prisoners were ordered to line up to get sandwich and milk. They returned to their spots on the colored side, sat down cross-legged, placing cup on some hard cement floor and sandwich atop. No one ate, no one drank. We all simply looked at each other across the vast expanse. After the last Black prisoner took his seat, all of us prisoners, Black and white together, and without prearrangement, picked up our sandwiches and broke bread as one. And that's what the civil rights movement did to me. I want to tell you one more anecdote, if I may. I want to tell you about Vernon Damer. Before I lived in Columbia, Mississippi, I lived in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, in the southern part of the state. Reverend Bob Beach was the director of the Hattiesburg project of the Delta Ministry of the National Council of Churches. I was on staff of COFO, the Council of Federated Organizations, and MFDP, Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Vernon Damer headed the NAACP in Hattiesburg. He asked Bob and me to come out to his house. He showed us a sign he said the KKK had affixed to a tree nearby. "I want you," in the white knights of the Mississippi Ku Klux Klan. This is the sign, or a facsimile. I donated the original sign. It was beginning to deteriorate, to the University of Southern Mississippi. It was the death threat of the KKK, declared Mr. Damer. He had gone on the radio offering to pay the poll tax of anyone wanting to register to vote. This tax and a ridiculous literacy test were used for decades by racist officials to keep African Americans from voting. Mr. Damer told us that he would continue to stand up for civil rights. He would not be intimidated. One night, 6 months later, the Klan surrounded his house, set it ablaze, and shot into the house, trying to keep the occupants from escaping so they would perish in the flames. Mr. Damer returned fire, and the KKK fled. Mr. Damer's wife escaped unharmed. His daughter was burned, but survived. Vernon Damer was burned over most of his body and died of smoke inhalation. A couple of days later, one of my daughters was named after him. I was living in Columbia, Mississippi, 36 miles away, when Mr. Damer was assassinated. 2 other civil rights workers and I drove to Hattiesburg a couple of days later to pay our respects to the family. I knew the family. We were stopped and questioned closely by the FBI, as if we were possible perpetrators. But we had a good alibi. The 3 of us had just gotten out of jail in Columbia, Marion County, having been incarcerated for almost 2 weeks for protesting several racist injustices. So we could not have been the murderers of Vernon Damer. 4 of Mr. Damer's sons were in the military defending our country from enemies, domestic and foreign, when their father was murdered. As for your profession, social work, and what is to be done today, I am not a social worker, and so you'll forgive my arrogance. I do not know what the word normal means, but I do know a truth about so many helping professions and their underlying theoretical constructs, social work, psychiatry, psychology, and so on. You too often try to adjust normal but sensitive people to an abnormal and screwed up world. Within this abnormal and screwed up world, some people may be better able to adapt and others less well able to adapt. And here social workers can help, assuming your caseloads are not overbearing. Actually, it does not matter to which of these groups your clients belong. Why? Because if they don't have the money to pay the rent, feed the children, it is society, not them as individuals, that must be changed. Or as the great labor organizer of coal miners, Mother Jones, put it so many years ago, pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. I have a number of questions which I will email to Angela, but these are the questions I'd like you to think about, maybe even discuss some today again. 1, why did the civil rights movement, as earth-shaking as it was, not fully succeed? 2, as social workers, is it not your responsibility and goal, where possible, just to help individuals adjust so they can survive these difficult times? Or rather, should our goal work be to participate in helping uprooting the causes of these crises? 3, are these crises connected? And if so, how should we prioritize our work? And I had Angela send you a video, or maybe a text, the tape of Reverend William Barber's recent speech. 4, should social workers have a social conscience? And is there a difference between the practical and the moral basis for that conscience? 5, with Zoom, our social context, do we need to facilitate its efficacy and improve its democratic nature? 6, why the emergence of the social justice anti-racist movement now, and how far do you want it to go or not go? 7, how much of the media reportage and our individual and collective education about racial and justice matters is objective? And how much of the media and the political responses behind it are against significant change in the efforts to achieve justice, against significant change, i.e., is there an active and serious political force fighting against social justice change in Louisville, in Jeffersonville, in the United States of America? 8, Are there monuments and beliefs about our history and ourselves that need to be torn down? And what do they need to be replaced with? 9, how did we, with all our wealth and talent, get into this predicament? And how can we get out given the extensive nature of the combined challenges? And what would be the necessary or best approach? 10, I am a dummy when it comes to computer technology, but I hope you will post links and other relevant information on the chat. Can the chat information be retained and shared afterwards? 13, grace. Talk about grace. Grace should be understood as encouraging and emphasizing both respect and mutual benefit, not as avoidance of uncomfortable but important issues. And I pay tribute to Angela for not avoiding these uncomfortable but important issues. 14, I hope someone in your group can be responsible for setting up and maintaining a log, small, simple website of the important questions and issues raised, along with available citations and sources, not just mine, but everybody else's. 15, ask yourselves, why didn't social work solve these problems already? Why? Or accurately, why the hell didn't social work solve this? And 15, even though you called your profession social work, how very social are you? A labor organizer, and I'm come out of the labor movement, recently posted on Facebook the following. Did you ever hear of the expression perfect storm? Well, that is what we are trapped in right now. 7 crises all clobbering us at the same time. The climate crisis, a severe economic collapse, racism, the coronavirus pandemic, the deepening crisis of inequality between the rich and the working class, a disastrous foreign policy crisis, an economic crisis setting us up for fascism. Let me return to Jeffersonville, Indiana. I don't know a hell of a lot about Jeffersonville, something, but that's never stopped me when I didn't know something from talking about it. I look at Jeffersonville and I have a lot of questions. I look at Port Fulton, I guess it's now called Zurloff, a poor and not so poor section. I look at the senior housing, that project. Then I look at the Amazon area where Amazon was built and the more wealthy folk live. In Clayburgh, you have mixed situation, projects, low income, middle class housing, removed elementary schools, so children will have to be bused. New school across the street from the Clark County Jail. Why the hell was it built across the street from the jailhouse? New Albany High School, Jeffersonville High School, taught nothing about Black history in the 1960s. Nowadays, the social studies teachers teach anything about civil rights. Maybe 5% of Jeffersonville, as I understand it, speak Spanish at home. How many of you can converse in Spanish? Or more properly, ¿cuántos de ustedes tienen un conocimiento fluido de español? Mi español es gringo típico, lo siento mucho. I will close, if I may, 2 quotes. The first comes from Frederick Douglass in 1857. The struggle may be a moral one or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. In the light of these ideas, Negroes will be hunted at the north and held and flogged at the south so long as they submit to those devilish outrages and make no resistance, either moral or physical. Men may not get all they pay for in this world, but they must certainly pay for all they get. If we ever get free from the oppressions and wrongs heaped upon us, we must pay for their removal. We must do this by labor, by suffering, by sacrifice, and if need be, by our lives and the lives of others. Quote from Frederick Douglass. And one last quote. Patria o muerte venceremos. Liberty or death, we shall be victorious. Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Appreciate that. I'm going to ask Dre to unmute to see if he has anything else to share on the topic.
Definitely. I appreciate that, Ira. And I know we kind of moving kind of fast, but definitely you all take time to look at some of those questions that Ira posed. Even if you don't submit them back in, just look at them, mull them over your consciousness and how it feeds into your work. So I'm gonna be totally honest, me and Ira did not get to coordinate, and that's totally my fault. I'm like 48 hours behind the busy, and me and Ira did not get to coordinate totally, but because we do some of the same work, we kind of think along the same lines. So some of the things that I want to touch on real quick, and let me say this, once I get done, I would like to open it up. I know Ira feels the same way. We don't really like to just talk to groups. We like to communicate with groups. And so, once I get done with this, I would definitely love, if anybody has any rebuttals, comments, questions, concerns, please give them to us and let's open up this discussion, because I think people really learn better when we actually have communication. And I want to make sure that whatever it is that you guys want to pick from us, that you get it fully. So a few things I just want to add is that my first experience with Ann Braden, who is one of the founders of the Kentucky Alliance, was during my college years. As I was about to graduate college, I got recruited for a program called the Healing History Program, in which it took about 50 community residents, Louisville residents from all over the community. It put us all in one group. I'm talking about all type of people, all type of backgrounds, women, men, different cultures, different ages, all of that. And it put us in one group, and it asked us all the same questions about racial healing, racial ideology, racial knowledge, racial historical perspectives, things of that nature. And it made us answer them and be open and honest as a group, across cultural lines, across racial lines, across economic lines, across all of this. And that was about, I don't know, I guess that was about probably about 7 years ago. We're actually about to have a reunion about that. But I wanted to introduce that because I feel like this is like a mini piece of that, in a sense, for us to provide any type of information or perspective that can help you all with your work that you're doing with the families on this side of the bridge and the other. So with that, let's talk about like cultural differences. I'm not sure how deep you all get into counseling and helping with the family. I'm pretty sure it's kind of pretty deep. I wanted to ask about cultural differences and kind of talk about that, cultural differences within social work. That was one thing that we kind of touched on when I was at U of L, but I feel like it is developed in such a way, especially with everything that's going on now around the nation, that is developed in such a way that that conversation needs to be expanded on and, poked at a little bit. Because from my experience in working for the system and working outside of the system, I've come to understand that the system has a unique perspective on what social work and what family should look like in particular. And I don't know if that spans across all the cultural and racial lines as we think it should sometimes. Meaning, cultural differences in family structure, cultural differences in family values, and in family goals. Those are some of the three main things that we have found that kind of differ between different different demographics of families. And so with a one family model fits all type of model, what we found is that it actually hurts and hinders some of the other family structures that are trying to be. Sorry, I'm getting 1,000 notifications. Other family structures that are trying to find how they can work in an Americanized way. I mean, because we're talking about families from Somalia, we're talking about families from 100 different cultures in Africa. We're talking about families coming from India, Asia. You see what I'm saying? And just marriage is a different type of structure than we're used to here. A big thing that isn't dealt with like in social work as well. Well, actually, let me stay away from that. We're not going to talk about it. But no, I do want to talk about, do you all have any experiences with these type of things when you're dealing with, when you're caseworking with some of your families that, what works for this family as far as a structure or model doesn't really work for this family? And if, I don't know, I'm just curious to hear what you all experience and come across, and some of the issues that you all come across, and maybe me and Ira can provide some knowledge about that. So I'm gonna open it up right now for questions, comments, experiences, situations that anybody would like to pull out. Don't everybody speak at once.
I'll start. As is typically my job with Family Time, I'm a clinical consultant for Family Time and do a lot of the trainings and their group supervision, but my full-time job is the director at a residential facility that provides similar services to Family Time in terms of case management and parenting services. We also provide therapy, but our program is residential. And one of the things that I've been asked before, look at our even the demographics of the referrals that we receive. There is a disproportionate number of white families that tend to be referred to our program than any minority. And someone asked me once why I thought that was, and I really didn't have an answer. But what has been suggested, and I think there may be some truth to it, is that we know that, basically my program is in many ways a diversion program. It is an alternative to incarceration for people. And it seems like possibly that, sort of with what we know about the, disproportionate number of Black people and other minorities that aren't given the same opportunities, that maybe even at the state level, right? So people are referred to me by their caseworkers, that I can tell that there doesn't seem to be an equal amount of opportunity just for diversion programs for non-white people. So, maybe even, I guess it almost feels like that we need to educate, the larger group to try and steer some of those referrals to be a little more equitable.
If I could jump in on that, Liz, that's definitely, you're totally right. We've done some research across the nation, and there's definitely a disproportionate in the type of, let's call them privileges dealt with that through the court system for whites versus minorities, Black and Hispanic. And that's one thing that's definitely on there, is that more whites are privy to diversion and other tactics to clear the record, whereas the Black and Hispanic population is more privy to incarceration, and we don't get rehabilitation for the most part. One thing I would probably suggest to your group is seek those out. nobody's going to give them to you unless you say it. Like, you know, I'm getting 90% white cases. I know you guys got 85% Black and Latino in jail. I need to start seeing some equality in my cases so we can start making sure that we're helping everybody and not just a particular group. And until you say that, you know, that might not ever happen. You know what I'm saying? It's the biggest part about it is just speaking on it, really speaking on it. Because we have the same thing over here in Jefferson County. I work in the law right now. I do, you know, that's my day job. I do law, and I definitely see that all day. You know, one of the lawyers that I work with used to be a county prosecutor. And, you know, he was one of the only Black county prosecutors. And that's something that he had to bring to the table too as well. You know, we have a white female with the same charge as a Black female, but the white female gets offered diversion, where the Black female gets offered incarceration or parole, you know, and it's not even an incarcerating offense. So these are like the subtle discriminations within our system. But it's people like you and us that when we see that, we gotta say it, and that'll start putting some things into motion to get that going. Because it's something different if the judge feels like he's throwing you cases, right? Let's help these kids. And then when we see these kids, they're not the same kids. But if you're the person helping the kids and you say, wait, that kid is the same as this kid, and I need both kids and both of their families, then the judge will start. You see what I'm saying? You know, it's a process. We don't live in a perfect world, y'all, and I don't want you to think that anything is perfect and everything's going on. It's not. It's not. And I feel like people who are in conversations like these, we are the vanguard to some things. And when we have these conversations, it helps us to say, you know what, I was thinking that, and now I'm about to act on that, because that's definitely true. So I commend you and I appreciate that. I definitely do.
Well, you know, it seems so obvious when you say it, but I mean, really, it's like, oh, I gotta put it out there. I gotta ask. I've gotta, you know, not just kind of know this in my head, but say, hey, Judge such and such, how about send me a little more diverse, you know, referrals or something like that. Like it feels so obvious that I didn't even think of it, but you're right, that could be such an important step.
And even establishing a relationship with the prosecutors, that's an excellent one, because really they're the ones who suggest it to the judge what it is. So if your company or your organization has a relationship with the prosecutors, that's where that's the big game right there.
I agree with Trey, and I would like to add another dimension, if I may. I used to rule on discrimination cases for the city of Louisville in the 1980s. And in the old days, back then, let's say you have a male supervisor and a female subordinate. And the supervisor makes an unwanted sexual advance. And the female subordinate wants to get the hell out of here. In the old days, he would say, bitch, you're fired. But they don't say that anymore. They say, Miss Jones, we'd like to retain you in employment, but you have not met our criteria for advancement. And instead of me saying that, I'd get a female supervisor to say that. How do you prove then a prima facie case of discrimination? You think this is just an esoteric example? This happens all the time, and it happens all the time today. Well, there is no way to directly deal with the particularities of a subject, because when you're ruling on a case, you have to rule on the specific instances, on the specific information. But our job, and I would dare say the job of social workers, is to help create a climate where they can't do that anymore.
Absolutely. I want to make one other comment, and then I'll let somebody else talk. Another example of just sort of the cultural differences that I came across, and it's been several years, but I had a Hispanic family referred to me at one time, and we were just sort of blithely going through the motions of helping her apply for housing, which required her to get a local criminal records check done in some places. and, you know, not really thinking anything about the implications of anything. I mean, talk about sort of a, you know, a narrow-minded situation. She did not have documentation. You know, she was not a legal citizen, and she had been, years before, she had taken a like traffic ticket for somebody, you know, who, you know, so, and then she failed to appear. So kind of unbeknownst to her, she forgot about it. There's this bench warrant out for her for this failure to appear on this traffic ticket, and not even thinking about those things, like going in saying, okay, go ahead and get your background check. So you can probably guess what happened. She was arrested, detained by ICE. It was the whole thing. And I mean, and just, I felt awful for having not even considered, you know, that her legal status could have potentially all this stuff. And it just feels so, you know, just narrow-minded. And so just that the cultural piece of knowing that there's some individuals that we have to sort of, you know, go through the motions a little bit differently in order to protect them.
That is excellent. That's kind of what I was getting at too with the work that we do with caseworking, because it's, you know, as that is a perfect example of how we can't handle everything the same, because everybody is subject to different circumstances. And if we can acknowledge that this system has disproportionate and discriminatory practices towards certain groups, then we've got to acknowledge that when we're rectifying or helping certain groups, that these type of situational things are common with that. Same thing, you know, when I help young brothers, right, I got to be very careful that, you know, I ask the right question. What's on your record? You know, what are we working with? You know, even just to get a job. You know, a young brother just to get a job. You know, when Black males are stopped disproportionately in their own neighborhood and then tagged with charges, sometimes felony charges for silly things, criminal trespassing on the felony degree, just like Attorney Daniel Cameron placed on the protesters. Like we just saw white privilege placed on the protesters. He gave them a felony for showing up at his abandoned house. He didn't even live there, but he upped the charges to a felony, right? Just to fuck with them, excuse my French, just to mess with them. And so when you're seeing this and you're dealing with people who are going through this on a daily basis, right? I can't tell y'all how many times that I've lived in a certain neighborhood in my community, and I wanted to, oh, you know, the store's about to close in 10 minutes. It's like 9:55. The store's about to close. Let me walk down the street and grab something from the store real quick. This is true story, y'all. So I throw on my hoodie, I walk down the street, you know, I'm coming back and I get stopped for no reason. This is Trayvon Martin all over again, but it's police instead of some crazy white man with a gun. And they say, what are you doing here? Why are you walking? What is this? You know, and all of this harassment for no reason. I'm a man walking in my own neighborhood. Now, where I'm getting with that is because we go through this every day. When caseworkers come in to help the family, there are different types of situations going on now. You have males that have felony charges at 17 and 18. And so when we're talking about, well, let's go and get you a job. Let's sign up for some benefits from the government. All that's done. Mm-hmm. You can't get SNAP benefits. You can't get state benefits just because you had, when they were giving felonies out for weed, you had a bag of weed with you when you were 17, and now you're 21 and you're trying to get your life in order. Your girlfriend's about to have a baby. You can't get a job. Nothing legal. These are the type of issues and cultural situationships that take place that can't be molded to every family. And things like that to help, question. Ask. I know that in the end, we all have the same goals for the family, right? A good family structure, supportive, that's helping, and that pretty much doesn't need the caseworker in this house, right? Wherever we need to get to make sure that the caseworker can gradually fade out and the family can go on doing what they're due. That is the goal across cultural bounds, across cultural places. I think we can all agree on that. So how we get there, now that's a little different, right? That's where we come in with the differences. And the way that I would suggest to you all is and I have to do this as well. Don't think just because I'm Black, I just understand things. No, I got to go into African houses and households, and I got to ask the same question. I got to be just inquisitive. I am just as naive as you white ladies going into some Black households trying to understand what's going on. I am just as naive when I go into other cultures' households. So I'm giving you practice that helped me as well too. And the best thing is to try to understand and ask as many questions as you can at first. And then like Liz was saying, you know, to try not to fall in situations like that, it's best to kind of baby step your way with helping them, right? Because what I found out is the bullshit actually happens when we try to move fast with doing things that we know that need to be done, right? We come in, we see something, okay, you don't have any food for you and the baby. Okay, we can get you on some state benefits. I need you to go fill out this application real quick. And then all of a sudden, bam. Oh, wait, you can't fill out this application. You got a bench warrant. ICE is looking for you because of some traffic situation that messed up because you don't understand the laws of the country and understand that you have to show up for court or get a lawyer to go. All of this, right? And so without moving fast, asking questions. And sometimes I go handle the process. I do a mock process if I don't know the process, or if I'm weary that this process might not benefit our clients at the same time that on the same level that it should. So mock process meaning I'll walk through it myself. I'll walk through it with them, or I'll walk through it with somebody who I know does not have certain issues. The best thing about what you said, Liz, is now you know. That's the best thing about what you said, is now you know. And so, yeah, that happened, but now I know that this type of stuff could happen, and I've got to be aware when I'm asking my clients what they need and how we can go about getting it, right? A simple intake form. I know a lot of us as caseworkers and social workers have intake forms, but these type of situations should be helping you to reevaluate these intake forms and these I don't know if you all, a lot of you, I know I'm dealing with a lot of different organizations and groups right now, but a lot of you all usually keep notes about the cases that you're working. And some of these things, these are what the notes are for, right? These are what the notes are for. So you gotta document this stuff, right? I know it was a messed up situation, Liz, but document that, put that in the notes, put that on the intake forms. Do you have anything, right? And so before we even go to start helping families now, the first thing we can do is run background checks as an organization about a person. And then we can alert them like, okay, look, before you go clear this up, we need to help you get this stuff cleared up. You got an old traffic ticket. And if I take you in to start getting your stuff in order now, some other stuff is going to fall through the pipe. And that's not going to be good for us. So let's baby step this. Let's rewind. All right, let's go. Let's get with our legal team. See what you need to do to get rid of this traffic ticket. All right, get that cleared up. Now you have no warrants. Now we can start moving, taking our steps to move towards where we need to go. Does that make sense for everybody? Or did anybody want to jump in and add anything?
I will, Dre. That's fascinating, the part about the criminal history checks, because we actually do those at intake, but the reason we do them is for a protective measure for ourselves. Like, I'd never seen it in the frame the way that you just framed it. I just thought we were checking background checks to see if somebody, had assaulted a social worker last year, or if there's anything that we need to know in terms of keeping ourselves safe. So we've already got the process. We just need to twist it a little bit to more of an advocacy stance, and use that same information we're already getting to what you say, help people overcome those back warrants or fines or whatever they need to do. So thank you.
And
That's a great tip.
maybe we could start having the providers print them and put them in their mock files and keep with them, because sometimes our clients may not even know that they have a warrant, and it pops up when we do the criminal backgrounds, and we're like, oh, you've got a bench warrant, and they don't know that, and then we can help them get it taken care of.
A real easy way to start that process, so you all would know, is it's very easy to check if somebody has, if you have a legal department or a legal team and they have access to courts, it takes them 5 minutes to check and see if anybody has a warrant. 5 minutes, literally. I type in your name, your birthday, or your social, and I can check if you have an active warrant, whether it's in Indiana or Kentucky. And so, yeah, definitely adding that with and checking to make sure you all are safe. That is excellent. Like, no, you keep that process in place. But I understand what you're saying, right? And a lot of things can be killed with like two birds, one stone. How my granny used to say it, 2 birds, 1 stone. So yeah, it's just about perspective. Did anybody else have any situations or experiences they'd like to share? I'm loving this.
I don't know if Milena is still on. Milena, not to call you out, but in terms of not wanting to call the police because of a situation that was going on, she's unmuted, so maybe she'll tell us about it. Milena, is that all right?
Excellent.
Tell it if you want.
Okay, I'm sorry. What were you asking me about? What my situation that happened to me?
Yeah, with the client a couple weeks ago when you weren't able to call the police.
Right. I was with the African American client, and we experienced a situation where I normally would have called the police for help, but just the fact that she was Black and me being Hispanic, I just felt safer handling myself than calling the police. So that was my first thought at that moment, that, you know, just being afraid of having called the police. Yeah.
I definitely can feel you on that, Milena. I've had issues like that as well. And we are living in a sad time when the people we are supposed to call to do their job, we are afraid to call them because they might excessively do their job. And we might feel like that blood is on our hands. Mm-hmm. That's just a sad time. We're just living in a sad time. And unfortunately, all I can tell y'all is to use your discretion. Do not put your life on the line. When I train my Panthers and the people that I train in the community, look, at the end of the day, the first goal is to come home safely. Now, outside of that, let's talk about police presence in family work and social work. I'm not a big advocate of government in family affair. Honestly, because from the government point of view, and it might be a little different, maybe y'all can tell me about Indiana, because I haven't had too much experience with Indiana family and law. But from the government point of view in Kentucky, in the KSP, the government's only invested interest in your family is money. As long as they are being paid to keep their nose in your family's business, that is the government's only vested interest. A man could kill his wife in a domestic dispute, and the government, outside of locking him up, which you would do anything criminal, there's nothing else that's going to happen. As long as he was paying that child support, as long as he was doubling down on that alimony. So I'm not a real big advocate of government in family affairs, especially when we're talking across cultural lines. You know, outside of what we gotta put government into, right? I gotta get them some benefits. I gotta get them enrolled in programs for health insurance, situations like that. But like, I'm sorry, I don't know. Is it Milena?
Yes.
Like she was saying, like you were saying, you know, some of those outside of that, it's very, you know, and I feel sorry that you were in a situation like that. You know, I feel sorry that we're in a time like that. But one, always be safe, and two, I appreciate you for actually considering what could happen. You know, and for you as well to be an Hispanic woman. You know, it's not all safe. You know, I know I'm black, I look black,
Right.
but I was actually born in Madrid. So, you know, my first language was Spanish. So, you know, I'm a black Hispanic. So, you know, I feel you, but you know what I'm saying? I feel you. But yeah, just using y'all's discretion, man. Just use your discretion. Stay safe. Use your discretion. If ever your life or the child's life or some other family member, one of your workers' life or health is on the line, you know, do what you have to do. But for the most part, so let's talk about the other side. So with our trauma center, what we teach a lot of our Panthers who are sort of first responders in the community, before we actually get the family's case in and do things like that. Some of our first responders, the things that we teach them, the biggest thing we teach them is de-escalation. And that's something that the police, the LMPD has not even taught. And for a person who does security, so that's like my side business. I do a lot of security for events and things of that nature. And I gotta tell you, like, people love when I do security for one reason, because they know shit's never gonna happen. Even when stuff happens, it's never gonna happen. Because I've trained my team to de-escalate first and foremost. Now they're trained to escort a person out, to defend themselves, and to, you know, protect the crowd and act in an active shooter situation. So they are trained like police, and not more. But our first and only goal is de-escalation. We are not here to police the crowd. We are here to keep the crowd safe. And that even means the crowd safe from itself. And so when you're doing social work, I would make sure that my company or my organization is having annual or regular workshops on de-escalating, especially when you're going into aggressive communities, dealing with people with less education, less economic welfare. You know, I'm not calling them stupid, but we know who we're dealing with. Does that make sense? From somebody who deals in the court all the time, we know we have different levels of education. We have different levels of self-respect within people. And so sometimes people might come to you, you know, and you're trying to be the helper, and they're trying to cuss you out and tell you, you can't come in my family. You're trying to destroy my family and this and that. And you were told by the courts to come here. But what they don't see is that you got to understand, to some families, the courts, the cops, the government, it's been nothing but a hassle. So to them, the government stuff is kind of like an enemy. But where you come in is to tell them, government's not necessarily your enemy. You've just been engaging with them the wrong way, right? You've had some experiences in engaging with them in a way that's come out with them, where it seems like them on top and you on the bottom. Let me show you how to engage them in the right way so it benefits not only you individually, but it benefits your family as well. Am I making sense with that?
I'd like to speak to that also, if I may, in response to Milena. I agree with what Trey just said, but I want to talk about the role of police generally and police unions. Police generally in the United States, starting in the 1800s, was to protect private property. There were private police forces that were hired by different corporations to break strikes and various other things. It It was only later that they it transmogrified to it as well encompass the role in communities. Well, the role of police is to protect private property. That's what they do. I also want to say something about police unions. And I'm not saying you should have nothing to do with police. Police provide a needed service at times, but not at all times. And sometimes when they provide the service, they also engage in brutality. I was on the Central Labor Council for 8 years. I'm still quite involved in the labor movement. I know a little about the labor movement. Police unions are our fifth column within the labor movement. They've caused us all kinds of difficulties. I have felt very protected at times. Police have done a very good job because I'm white and I'm middle class. Not always done a decent job, many times have. But I think that it's the obligation, Milena, of you and other social workers to not just deal with the particularities of the difficulties, but understand what the role of police are in society. Once we do that, we'll be able to move forward.
Yeah, thank you.
That's definitely true. Just to add on what Ira was saying, you know, policing was began to protect personal property. Policing was began by the slaveholders to bring their slaves back, and in an effort to appease the lower class white community. That's where policing started, right? When the lower class white community was saying, hey, you know, we feel like we on the same level as the blacks. You treat us like blacks. And then they said, no. Y'all not blacks. Here, let me give you something to appease you, to put you above the blacks. And so they made them police officers to bring back their insurance claims from the escaped slaves. That's where policing started. If you all didn't know, that's what Ira was hinting at. So they've always historically and been founded on protecting personal property, especially property that looks like me. So.
That's very helpful. The one thing I want to admit to or share that I've learned during this, I've learned a lot of shocking things, but the one thing is I didn't know that people of color were not comfortable calling the police in the event of an emergency. I literally didn't know that. I've been on this earth for 50 years. I've been to college a couple times, and until this current state of civil unrest happened, I never considered that perspective. So that's just an example of my own white privilege. You know, I go to bed at night knowing that, you know, if it hits the fan, something happens, I just call, and I'm two blocks from the police station. They will be there. And I never considered what it would be like to not have that, and how you just have to operate from a baseline of fear and knowing no one's coming. You know, like it reminds me of those people on the roofs during Katrina in New Orleans. It's like no one's coming for you. The water's rising and you're on your own. And I can't imagine operating day to day through life without that. And what that lack of a feeling of basic personal safety does to a person, and how exhausting that must be to live in that reality. So thank you for the eye-opening talk about that. And I'm sorry that happened with Milena and our client, but I think that's what really brought me to the realization. I mean, I'd heard about it before, but I really didn't get it until that happened. So that's very helpful. In the 10 minutes we have left, if Ira and Dre could give us a little short comment, or long, we have 10 whole minutes, about what is it to be an ally, white ally, or other person ally to this movement, to Black and African American people, and what does that mean, and what should we be doing, us white people, I guess. I mean, I'm not saying that we don't want to know what other people of color want to do, but if you could speak to that, that'd be super helpful.
Oh, and I don't remember who it was, and I'll make it gender neutral, said, any person's death diminishes me, for I am involved in humankind. And so the word white skin privilege at all. There is a privilege. It's a relative privilege. I never regarded it a privilege for me to sell my labor power on an assembly line and work myself to death where I have very serious illnesses as a result of breathing and all that stuff. People who were not able to even get those jobs, yes, there is a privilege. I prefer not to have to deal with the concept of privilege per se, but it's the way it has become actualized. I prefer to deal with discrimination based on race, sex, age, disability, sexual orientation. I prefer to deal with the disproportionate number of poor and working class people who can hardly pay their damn bills every day. Once that happens, then I think a theoretical construct can be debated and discussed. But we have to be about the business, not just of providing social services, but in the business of saying that it's not an aberration or a misordering of priority that some people.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll jump in on that. Appreciate you, Ira.
Well, you're smart when you agree with me.
So, Angela, to answer your question, before you can be an ally, you must first know yourself and understand your own situation. Historically, I think the Eurocentric mind frame is of a manifest destiny. How can I help you all? How can I help you all do that? And kind of like what we talked about earlier, sometimes we get so caught up in helping people that we try to make the help look like the help that we would need. And that's not always what they need. And I think that was one of the biggest things we talked about today, and the cultural differences, right? To the same goals, but the differences, the different routes that we have to take to get there. And I would say for any allies, white, black, brown, blue, towards another ally that you don't know, understand yourself first. When you can understand yourself, then understand them. When you can understand them, it should help you understand yourself more. Then you can actually be an ally. Because if you don't know what position you're in, or position the person you're trying to support is in, can you actually be and call yourself an ally? You know, I applaud Melania's awareness of the situation to understand that am I calling myself an actual ally if I call the police right now? But for her to even understand, to ask herself that question, you know, to even understand that I'm a Hispanic woman, I'm dealing with a black family. If I call the white police, that's just a situation for, I don't know. And let's see if I can understand the situation first, de-escalate it, and we can handle it as professionals and family first. So that's just a mini example, but that's on a broad level what I mean. You know, we have an Americanized way of helping people, and that's to go in and tell them what they need. And that's very American, and that's very bullshit. I'm just telling you now, it doesn't help people who need a certain kind of help. And, you know, they need water and we're trying to feed them milk. You know, they need oxygen and H2O. We're trying to give them calcium. So it's first thing understanding my body to know that my body needs H2O first and foremost. Then it might need calcium, vitamin D, everything else along with that. So then I can understand their body. Then I ask them, is your body like my body? Do you do this? Is your body made? Okay, your body's made of H2O too. So let's run down this together. What do we need? And I think that is the only way that we could ever ally anybody or help or support anybody. And that's not just across cultural barriers or racial barriers. That's in your own family. I've dealt with that in my own family. You know, we got family members who might be struggling or need something, and you try to offer some help and they're like, I don't need that. And then you got to understand, like, okay, they're, you know, I want them to get out of that, but they want to be in it because they want to succeed at it. So how can I help you stay in it and succeed at it? And then we have to, our ask change, our support changes. It's like, all right, so what do you need? Why do I need you to come to my event and just stand here and support me? And you're like, that's it? Yes. And you're like, all right, cool, shit. That was easier than what I wanted to do. And it eventually ends up being that way. I'm sorry, was somebody saying something?
I like the way you just explained it. It sounds great. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you, Melania. I mean, it takes that. I mean, we really have to be conscious enough to really call ourselves allies to people, you know, really. So that's my 2 cents. Any questions, comments? Feel free.
No, that's really helpful. I have a long way to go on it. I think I really do. And we're near the end, so I did want to share a couple photos briefly. Now I'm feeling kind of bad about it because now that Dre has explained to me about the work I need to do on being an ally. One of the things that I have done is gone down to the protest with my kids. And can you guys see my screen now? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there we are, and this is from a email I've already sent out to Family Time. So I won't do the whole Frederick Douglass quote because Ira did it so well. But that's my perspective, that a fight is necessary. And I'm not saying that everyone at Family Time needs to go make a sign and, you know, head downtown. You don't need, you do what you're called to do, but I just want to stress that you are called to do something, and starting with learning and taking what Ira and Dre have told us to heart, and using that as a new frame of reference in the work that you do with our clients, families of color. For me, every little bit helps. I mean, I don't have a vast amount of time, and I know you guys don't either. So do what you're called to do. And if you think it can't matter, so these are my girls when we were at the protest, and that road wasn't blocked. So they were blocking it, which at first I was like, oh no, I told, you know, their dad I'd keep an eye on them and make sure we're all safe. But they were pretty staunch in their decision to block that road. And then they're standing there alone, and within 10 minutes, it looked like that. So, I mean, that's just it's a small thing, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is any little thing that you can do, any step you can take, educate a family member, read a book, watch the videos that I'm sending, and be a part of making things better. And at the end of our regular Zoom meetings, when we talk about the coronavirus, or at the beginning and the end, I tell everyone and myself that it's going to be okay and it's going to end, and we'll all get through this together. But for this issue, so racism, social justice, I can't say that. It's not going to get better anytime soon, and it's definitely not going to get better if people don't step up, stand up, do something. And so I guess I'll just leave it with that. I mean, I hope that it'll get better, but it's going to take us all doing what we can do. So thank you to Dre and Ira. If you have any parting comments, I'll cede the floor, as they say, and let you make those before we wrap it up.
I just want to say real quickly that, Ira, I really liked your questions, and I would like, Angela, for us to kind of systematically go through those possibly in our next meeting, and even just do some smaller breakouts and kind of let people really start thinking about those questions, because I do think that they need some definitive attention, and I don't want to trust people to do that on their own. I'd rather, kind of intentionally discuss that next time, if that's okay with you, Angela.
That is a great plan, Dr. Liz. Thank you. We shall do it.
I appreciate you all having me. If I could just say real quick, I definitely appreciate this conversation. I always love to sit and talk with people, especially who are doing in the same work that I'm doing. So hopefully this isn't the last time. We can all get together soon or do it again or something. I definitely appreciate this. And like you said, Angela, just learn, get out there, do something, learn. You don't have to be on the front lines. You can deliver water to the front lines. It's just, every piece is its own. Every piece is its own thing. Everybody does their own piece. Everybody's a hand, a foot, finger, head, anything. But it's going to take everybody to make this change for the best for everybody. Again, I'll say that. It's going to take everybody to make this thing change for the best for everybody. So I appreciate y'all having me. Peace and love.
I also feel very good about this discussion. And if I could take the Merchant of Venice, and he had a male reference. I don't know how to make it gender neutral, but I'll try. There is a tide in the affairs of people, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted all the voyage of their lives is bound in shallows and misery. At such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures. Well, that damn current is right here for us now. And what the hell are we gonna do about it?
Amen.
I will say that they talked about what you, as one of the people that go downtown all the time, I do know right now if you don't want to protest or do something like that, they are in need of masks, food, and water if somebody wanted to donate that.
Yes, mass food, water. I do a lot of security down in the Louisville protest, just making sure that people stay safe. So yeah, I can definitely confirm that. Mass food, chips, snacks, waters, Gatorades, hot dogs, cookies, things that they can grill. Maybe even some umbrellas and conditions. I think it's raining downtown right now. So, some ponchos or things of that nature. Yeah, those are all on the list. So, yeah.
And I also can tell you some of the things that, as an educator, JCPS, some of the things that we've been doing. Yes, people are downtown protesting, and I've been involved in the protest, but we've been taking different food to different areas to feed the homeless as well. So if you want to just grab some snack lunches and just the people that's on the corner asking for food, I keep stuff in the trunk. So if somebody asks me for some food, I just pop the trunk, say get your bag out. So you can do stuff like that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Angela, because everything doesn't need to be centralized downtown. There's a lot going on in the communities, and there's still people who's hungry. There's still people who need clothes. And so if your help isn't downtown, you can always help wherever that need is. So don't feel limited to just, be downtown on the movement. Just you all doing your work. Your work, doing it righteously is a piece in this. I don't want you to think that, because you didn't make a sign or you didn't go protest or do anything of that nature, that you're not in it. No, you doing your work righteously. You learning yourself, you learning your families, and you doing your best of your ability to help them get out of the situations and into better situations. That is work, you all, and you deserve a round of applause for that. In fact, pat yourself on the back. And if that's all the work that you can do, that is enough work. If you can do more, because it's going to take all of us.
All right, well said. It'll take all of us. Thank you for that positive end to our talk today. And I do hope that you can join us again. I'll be in touch because I think this has been extremely helpful. And again, I just appreciate you guys and the work you're doing and sharing with us today. So, and thanks to all y'all, family time people and friends who joined in. We'll do it again. Bye, peace, everyone.
Love, thank you.
Thank you.